Time and time again, men experience this same pattern. He meets a girl and she's attracted to him and things are going well. Maybe they even start dating. But as the days wear on, there starts to be this shift. She goes from being warm and receptive to just starting to be cold and distant. And he can't figure out what's happened. Like, he's not changed his behaviour, but all this does is trigger him to go searching to try and get that connection that they had at the beginning. So he steps forward to try and re-establish that connection. He tries harder, and when he steps forward, she steps back. And then this repeats and repeats and repeats until she finally just breaks off the relationship. And he is left devastated because he put in all of this effort. He gave so much of himself for her, but now he's got nothing. And this is a familiar pattern for a lot of modern men, and one that they will continue to repeat over and over again unless they actually try and do something about it, because what's happening to them is really deeply ingrained. And if this story feels familiar to you, I'm sorry to say it, but what is happening is you are overly invested in the validation of the girl. That, simply put, how she feels about you dictates your self-worth. That you give your other partner all the power to determine how you feel about yourself. And what this does is create the fact that you aren't really you. You're just this like image of what you think she wants you to be. You're not really a real person. And this is what starts to drive her away, because think about it for yourself. Think about a friend of yours, a family member of yours. Unless you are some guy with an absolute superiority complex, the idea that that friend or that family member would base their entire level of self-worth off how you feel about them feels icky. It doesn't feel nice. And to a girl, it feels especially icky if her partner is like this, because she wants to be able to look up to you, man. And how can she do that if she knows that all of your self-esteem and confidence is purely reliant on how she feels about you on that random day? It's just counterintuitive. So even whilst it might have felt amazing at the beginning and she was really enjoying all this attention and all this effort that you were putting in to garner her approval and attention, well, it wears thin pretty fast and she will start to resent you for it. And this is why you'll get so confused, because your behaviour won't change. You were doing this at the start and you were doing it afterwards, but it's her feelings towards it that does change. And speaking for myself, that this isn't a habit that you can just brush off. This is ingrained from when you were seriously young, that you were the person that was growing up surrounded by, like, your mother, the female teachers at school. You were raised on this idea of getting female approval makes you accepted from the group. And that's okay, but there needs to come a time where you start to grow out of that phase and start to have your own sense of your own identity. So in this video, I'm going to break down the 3 practical steps that I took to help break free of that and start having significantly healthier relationships, and that don't just end up in this like toxicity and resentment where you end up getting hurt because you felt like you put everything you could have into that relationship and they didn't even try. So, firstly, that is, learn that it's okay to disappoint someone. This is one of the biggest fears of a person that requires approval from others. You can't disappoint them because then they might think worse of you. They might not think you're as good as you are. And then that'll diminish how you feel about yourself. But if you can never disappoint others, you will only ever disappoint yourself. You will never feel good about who you are, and they can't give you that sense of approval that you need. Fundamentally, it won't happen. So, as uncomfortable as the sensation as it is, starting to operate in the world where it's an understanding that I can disappoint someone else. I can not go to that event that I kind of said I was going to go to. And it's not making you out to be someone that's unreliable, because I don't recommend being an unreliable person, but just understanding that you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to put yourself first. You're allowed to see yourself as someone worthy of having their opinion be the highest level to them. And I know it sounds scary, because some people, they've probably never disappointed someone in their life on purpose. It's like you've never been able to say no when someone asks you to do something. And even then you got rejected because you were so willing to please. So now you think that, oh my God, I was so willing to please and I still got rejected. Imagine how bad it would have been if I'd actually stood my ground and disappointed them. They'd have chucked me away so much faster. When in reality, that's just not true. People respect you if you have boundaries, and having this frame shift that it's okay to disappoint someone is huge. I had this in one of my relationships where I was dating a girl and we'd only known each other maybe a week, and she wanted me to just swing by and meet her parents. And I'm obviously got that ingrained in me to try and seek approval from the girl and do what she wants. So part of me was almost like, yeah, this is normal, I could do that. And I had to catch myself and be like, no, I'm not going to meet your parents. I've met you a week. This is not normal. And I just set that boundary down. And then she ended up respecting me for it. And we went on to have a good relationship. And it's like she was disappointed. At that point, it wasn't like I set the boundary and she was super happy. She sulked for half an hour. And then after it, she was fine. You're okay. You are allowed to cause a negative emotion in someone else. It's not forbidden. It is okay. So understanding that you are allowed to disappoint someone is the first game changer in starting to seek your validation from yourself internally, as opposed to looking for it everywhere else. Secondly, identify your repeated patterns. As I say, this is something you've probably been doing since you were a small kid growing up. This isn't just something that you can easily take away. It's part of you. It's in your core being to be that person that seeks that validation, that people pleases. So this will have built up a bunch of patterns that are almost unconscious to you of where you go to seek approval. Maybe you plan those elaborate dates or get those elaborate gifts, but you don't do it because you love it. You do it because you want her to say how good it was and how much better the date you did than the date with her previous partner, so you can feel whole inside for that moment when she says that it was good and you were a good boy. So finding what are your patterns of behaviour, because there's this line by Neil Strauss that I adore, that unspoken expectations lead to premeditated resentments. And by that, it means that all these times when you're doing whatever it is, the date, the gifts, the text messaging, to be able to get validation from her, you're not explicitly stating that. You're putting in all this effort and making this unspoken expectation that she is going to adore you forever and give you all the love. And when she doesn't, when she does disappoint you, you start to resent her. And you start to feel negative towards her because she didn't give you everything whilst you were, even though they were never the conditions that were set. So if you look at yourself, find what your patterns are. Maybe it is how you text with a girl. I hate texting. I'm really not good at it. And for me, one of my repeated patterns that I needed to get away from was that of being sort of overly analytical to when she responded. How many kisses did you put in? Emojis, etc., etc. I just realised, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? Instead of getting so caught up in how I text with girls, Why don't I just leave texting more for logistics and just get to experience each other in person more? So when I'm dating a girl, we don't send a load of texts back and forth to each other all the time, because I know it just preys on my weaknesses. I'm not good with that. So instead, I'll send voice notes, I'll send photos, and we'll do things like that. Finding what your repeated patterns are and starting to correct for them will be huge. And finally, number 3. This one focuses on your identity, and it is you need to put yourself first and do the things that make you happy. You've decided that because everyone else is the one that validates you, your opinion and what you want is down last at the bottom. And as silly as it might sound, you just now need to start treating yourself better and putting in effort for yourself. I was speaking with a client recently, and he mentioned that when he was together in a relationship, he used to cook really elaborate meals, and he put in a bunch of effort with cooking. But now he's single, he doesn't. He's not really interested. And I saw that as a bad reaction, because you have an internal watcher in your own psyche that is watching how you treat yourself. And so he mentioned that he used to do, on a Friday, he would cook steaks for himself. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. That's such a cool habit, because you're reinforcing to your subconscious, okay, well, this is extra effort. And if I'm putting in this extra effort for myself, therefore, I must be worth something. I must be valuable. And I can seek my own sort of internal validation. And it's like, yeah, finding out ways that you want to treat yourself is massive. And the thing is, if you've never done this, maybe you've never gone through that exploratory period of finding out exactly what it is that you like, that you find interesting to do, and really gives you that sense of satisfaction that you no longer need the validation from the girl. From my own personal experience, mine's running. Of all the bloody hobbies that it could have been, I'm not doing this because it's self-improvement, let's go running. It just turns out running is the thing that I love, because it gives me that moment to myself, and it allows me to push myself exactly how much I want at any given time. I listen to music and I have such a good time. And I noticed whenever I'm in relationships and I start to slack off on running, instead I start to feel myself drift towards wanting validation from the girl, because I'm losing the parts of my identity that I hold dear to me, how I value myself. I value myself based on how much do I run, how much do I meditate, which I also really love, how much am I playing board games, how many movies am I watching. These are things that are important to me. And if I start to sort of drift away from them and spend just time with the girl and just thinking about the girl, then why should I care about myself? Clearly I don't. I'm not doing the things that make me happy. So I must be invested in this girl, and her opinion must be more than mine. So for you, starting to construct a life that you find meaningful is the way to unhook the validation from the girl, because if you don't enjoy your life, then you're going to look for all the meaning, all the purpose from your relationship with this girl. And as I say, if you've never done this, then you've got to go out exploring. I've done improv classes, which were huge. I've been to running clubs, obviously, and I've tried a bunch of different sports. I've done online clubs where they were just conversational things, where it's book clubs, and just finding out what it is for you. You will have your own personal desires that call out to you, and then they will start to fill up that void that you're using her to try and fill. These are the 3 things that are most important, to start to find a way to be your own sort of internal validator, that it is okay for you to disappoint someone. Truly, that is fine. Start to see your repeated patterns, because they're going to be in there. They're going to be ingrained deep, and they will try and trip you up. So when you see them, as I say, if you see yourself getting caught in this sort of texty mode of just being I'm feeling anxious, so I want her to validate me. When you know your patterns, you can kind of nip them in the bud. You can just be it's me doing that funky thing where I'm looking for validation from her, I'm rather than going down my usual road, I'm going to do something different this time. And you can only do that by honest reflection of what were your repeated patterns. What are the things that seem to drive you the most crazy? What is the thing that you do to receive validation? And then finally, finding that way to put yourself first, to understand who you are, not allow her to construct your identity, but for you to be firm in it yourself, because that's what she wants. She wants a partner who is strong in his identity, that is clear and concise about, this is who I am, and if you like that, awesome, we can have a great time together. But if this isn't for you, then that's okay, because even if you leave, I have all these parts of myself that I love, that I do, and starting to branch out and find out what exactly is it that makes you, you.